I never thought she would come back, Margaret whispered to herself as she watched the familiar old driveway from her kitchen window, the crisp Ohio morning air carrying memories she had long tucked away. For 20 years, she had raised her grandchildren, Lily and Noah, pouring every ounce of love, patience, and wisdom into their lives while quietly managing the household, balancing bills, school schedules, and holiday traditions as if it were second nature, all the while telling herself that one day, Emily, her daughter, would understand the sacrifices she had made. Yet now, seeing the familiar figure stepping out of her car with a confident stride and an unreadable smile, Margaret felt a twinge of unease, recalling the day Emily had left them behind to remarry, leaving the children and their world in Margaret's hands. And though anger flickered momentarily, it was quickly replaced by a calm resolve, because Margaret had learned that time could be a powerful ally, shaping her perspective, sharpening her instincts, and fortifying her patience. She remembered the evenings spent helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, and cheering at soccer games, small acts of devotion that, over the years, had built a quiet kingdom of respect and trust within her home, a kingdom she was not about to let crumble. And as she adjusted the cozy throw on the sofa and offered a welcoming smile to the returning daughter who had once abandoned them, there was a silent acknowledgement. Between them, a tension that spoke louder than words, hinting at the unresolved conflicts and hidden truths yet to surface, while outside, the sun glinted off the morning dew on the lawn, casting light on the path where history and family would soon collide, and Margaret, with steady hands and a mind honed by decades of experience, prepared herself to navigate the delicate dance of reunion, understanding that every word, gesture, and glance could ripple through the fragile bonds of this family, shaping the story of this unexpected encounter that would challenge loyalty, reveal character, and ultimately determine whether the love and sacrifices of a grandmother could withstand the return of a daughter who had chosen a different life. And as the door opened, the air thickened with anticipation, Margaret's heart steady, eyes clear, ready to face the chapter that was about to unfold, knowing that in the quiet strength of her presence lay the subtle power to guide the family through the storm of emotions, secrets, and choices that awaited them inside. A power born from years of unwavering care and the lessons learned from loving beyond measure. Margaret led Emily into the sunlit living room, the aroma of fresh coffee and homemade cinnamon rolls filling the air, a small gesture of normalcy that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. The children, Lily and Noah, were quietly playing on the living room rug, their laughter a gentle reminder of the years Margaret had devoted to raising them, and Emily watched with a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension, as if she were stepping into a world she had once abandoned and barely understood, while Margaret, maintaining a composed demeanor, guided her daughter to the sofa and gestured for her to sit, observing every subtle shift in expression, every hesitation, and every unspoken word, aware that the dynamics of this family had evolved far beyond the brief absence of 2 decades. Yet she kept her voice calm, welcoming, and infused with the warmth of someone who had lived with responsibility and care, subtly reminding Emily that the household had continued to flourish, that love had remained steadfast despite her departure, and that any claim to authority or control would require understanding, respect, and accountability. And as they spoke, Margaret gently probed Emily about her life, listening with patience to stories of new beginnings, challenges faced, and achievements celebrated. But all the while, Margaret noticed inconsistencies, small gaps, and unintentional slips that hinted at intentions beyond the surface narrative, and she silently cataloged each observation, preparing herself for the subtle maneuvering required to navigate the reunion without confrontation, because she knew that patience, timing, and careful conversation were far more powerful than immediate confrontation. And as the morning progressed, Emily suggested plans for integrating into the household, ways to spend time with the grandchildren, and ideas for family activities. Yet Margaret weighed each proposal against the stability, routines, and emotional well-being she had cultivated over the years, guiding the conversation with questions and reflections that encouraged honesty and transparency, while reinforcing the values and boundaries that defined her home. And even as the dialogue appeared friendly and collaborative, There was an undercurrent of quiet strategy, a delicate balancing act to ensure that the past would not be repeated and that any future decisions would honor the sacrifices, love, and dedication that had shaped the household. And as the afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating photographs of family milestones, laughter, and cherished memories, Margaret maintained her calm presence, subtly asserting the stability she had built, while inviting Emily to acknowledge her own role in the family, setting the stage for the unfolding story of reconciliation, understanding, and the eventual recognition of the responsibilities and bonds that could not be ignored, a lesson that would ripple through the interactions of the day, slowly revealing the true character of each family member and the dynamics that had persisted despite years of distance. As the afternoon unfolded, Margaret guided the family through the gentle rhythm of everyday life, preparing a light lunch in the sunlit kitchen while keeping an attentive eye on Lily and Noah, who eagerly helped set the table, laughing and sharing stories that bridged the years their mother had missed. Emily observed quietly, offering polite remarks, yet her tone carried a subtle tension that Margaret could sense, a mixture of curiosity, unease, and an underlying hope that her presence could be accepted without consequence. And Margaret, skilled at reading both words and silence, used each moment to teach, remind, and reinforce the values that had sustained the family for 2 decades, from the importance of gratitude to the respect for boundaries, all conveyed with warmth that disguised the firm strength behind her guidance. As they ate together, sharing simple dishes and light conversation, Margaret carefully steered interactions to highlight cooperation and kindness while observing how Emily responded to the cues, noticing the moments of hesitation and attempts to assert influence. Yet Margaret remained composed, understanding that patience and calm observation were more effective than confrontation, and after clearing the table, she suggested a walk through the garden, where the grandchildren ran ahead, laughing. Under the bright Ohio sun, their energy a vivid reminder of the time Margaret had devoted to their upbringing, while Emily followed, quietly reflecting on the household routines, the devotion that had maintained stability in her absence, and the subtle ways her mother had balanced authority with empathy. And as they paused by the blooming flower beds, Margaret gently initiated a conversation about family values, expectations, and the responsibilities that come with returning to a household she had once left behind, encouraging honesty and introspection, while carefully noting how Emily responded, the nuances of expression and the unspoken acknowledgments, all forming the foundation for understanding, reconciliation, and measured reintegration into the family life that had continued without disruption. And as the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the lawn, Margaret sensed the shifting dynamics, the subtle acknowledgement that trust, respect, and accountability were being re-established, and she knew that each choice, each word, each small gesture in this afternoon of shared moments would shape the future interactions, the relationship between mother and daughter, and the evolving bond with the grandchildren, creating a pathway that allowed both recognition of past absences and the careful rebuilding of family harmony, guided by the steady presence and wisdom of a grandmother whose love had never wavered despite years of separation. As the afternoon light softened into the warm glow of early evening, Margaret suggested they gather in the living room for a quiet activity, and the grandchildren eagerly settled on the carpet with coloring books and pencils while Emily perched on the sofa, watching with a mix of curiosity and apprehension, and Margaret, keeping her voice gentle yet deliberate, encouraged the children to share stories about their day and their favorite memories with their mother, guiding the conversation to foster openness and connection while subtly observing Emily's reactions, noting the small changes in posture, the fleeting expressions of surprise or hesitation, and the moments when she hesitated before speaking, which revealed more than words alone could convey. And Margaret, skilled in the nuances of family dynamics, understood that these subtle cues offered insight into Emily's mindset, her intentions, and her readiness to engage honestly with the household she had once left behind. And as the children laughed and shared drawings proudly displayed on the living room floor, Margaret complimented their creativity, emphasizing teamwork and appreciation. And even as Emily offered comments, Margaret carefully framed the conversation to highlight respect, patience, and accountability, guiding her daughter to recognize the importance of these values in sustaining the household over the past 20 years. And when the children moved to the window seat to admire the setting sun, Margaret invited Emily to participate in a discussion about planning for upcoming family events, using the opportunity to test her understanding of the routines, responsibilities, and traditions that had been maintained, while also allowing Emily to express her perspectives, hopes, and intentions in a safe and structured manner. And as they spoke, Margaret gently reminded her of the impact of choices made in the past, the importance of consistency in supporting the children, and the need for clear communication, reinforcing the idea that respect and honesty were essential to rebuilding trust. And throughout the conversation, she maintained a calm, composed presence, allowing Emily to feel included while subtly steering interactions to ensure that the family's well-being remained the priority. And by the time dinner preparations began, Margaret had carefully navigated the delicate balance between welcoming her daughter and preserving the stability and love that had been nurtured over the years, setting the stage for ongoing conversations, mutual understanding, and the gradual rebuilding of relationships that would honor both the past and the present, leaving everyone with a sense of anticipation, curiosity, and awareness of the complex yet nurturing bonds that define the family dynamic, a foundation upon which the next chapters of connection, reflection, and growth would be built. As the evening shadows stretched across the hardwood floors, Margaret invited Emily to join her in the kitchen to help organize the upcoming weekend plans. And while Emily arranged grocery lists and checked the pantry, Margaret guided the discussion with gentle questions, prompting her daughter to consider the responsibilities that came with reintegrating into the household. And she listened carefully to Emily's responses, noting both the sincerity and the hesitation, understanding that reintegration required more than physical presence, but also awareness of the routines, respect for established rules, and acknowledgement of the emotional investments made over the past 20 years. And as they spoke, Margaret subtly reinforced the significance of consistency, fairness, and thoughtful decision-making in the care of the grandchildren, weaving in stories from past experiences that illustrated the importance of patience, compromise, and communication, while also allowing Emily to express her aspirations and perspectives on family life. And throughout the conversation, the children occasionally interjected with questions or shared anecdotes, providing natural moments of interaction that Margaret used to reinforce lessons in empathy, listening, and cooperation. And Emily began to respond with greater awareness, reflecting on the ways her absence had impacted the household and the grandchildren. And Margaret acknowledged these reflections with quiet encouragement, maintaining a balance between support and gentle guidance. And as the kitchen filled with the aroma of fresh bread baking in the oven, the atmosphere softened, with shared laughter and smiles bridging gaps created by years of separation. Yet Margaret remained attentive to the subtle nuances of tone and body language, understanding that trust and mutual respect would take time to rebuild fully. And as they completed the preparations for dinner, Margaret suggested small collaborative activities for the evening, guiding Emily to take thoughtful initiatives while keeping the focus on the well-being and happiness of the grandchildren. And as they cleared the counters and set the table, Margaret observed the ease with which the children engaged with both adults, sensing that the foundations of understanding, accountability, and reconnection were taking root. And even as the evening approached, with soft light filtering through the windows and a calm sense of domestic rhythm settling over the household, Margaret maintained a steady presence, allowing the natural flow of interactions to nurture bonds, encourage reflection, and prepare each family member for the continued journey of shared responsibilities, respect, and appreciation, reinforcing the values that had sustained the home for 2 decades while carefully guiding the next steps of reconciliation and renewed connection. As twilight settled over the Ohio neighborhood, casting a gentle golden hue across the living room, Margaret suggested that they all gather around the fireplace for a quiet moment of reflection, and the children eagerly complied, sitting cross-legged with their favorite blankets, while Emily positioned herself nearby, her eyes betraying curiosity mixed with a hint of apprehension. And Margaret began recounting cherished family stories, moments of laughter, resilience, and learning, highlighting the values of integrity, empathy, and perseverance that had guided the household through years of joy and challenges, using each story to subtly reinforce the importance of mindful decision-making and thoughtful care, while inviting Emily to share her own reflections, thoughts, and hopes, carefully observing how she integrated past experiences with the current reality of the family dynamics. And as they spoke, Margaret encouraged the children to participate, asking questions that drew out their perspectives and emotions, allowing them to express appreciation, curiosity, and observations about their mother and grandmother, while Emily listened and responded with increasing engagement and attentiveness, beginning to grasp the depth of Margaret's lifelong commitment and the subtle wisdom she had imparted over decades. And Margaret guided the conversation to explore future plans, emphasizing collaboration, respect, and shared responsibility, demonstrating through dialogue how each action could influence relationships and contribute to a nurturing environment. And as the evening progressed, laughter, gentle teasing, and warm conversation filled the room, softening any lingering tension, while Margaret maintained a calm, steady presence, balancing support with guidance, and subtly setting expectations, allowing Emily to recognize both the privileges and responsibilities that came with returning to the household. And in these moments of quiet observation and shared interaction, Margaret carefully assessed the unfolding dynamics, ready to reinforce positive behaviors, encourage accountability, and facilitate understanding, ensuring that the family could move forward together with clarity, respect, and renewed bonds, while the children observed the exchange with delight and trust, sensing the stability and care that had always defined their home. And as the night deepened, Margaret felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that through thoughtful dialogue, gentle guidance, and measured attention to each interaction, she was shaping a foundation for lasting harmony, mutual respect, and meaningful reconnection that would carry the family forward into the days and years ahead, honoring the past while thoughtfully embracing the future. As the evening deepened, Margaret suggested that they all step outside to enjoy the cool, crisp air of the backyard, and the children ran ahead, their laughter mingling with the rustling of leaves as Emily followed more slowly, taking in the garden that Margaret had carefully tended over the years, from the neat rows of vegetables to the blooming flower beds, each plant a testament to patience, care, and dedication. And as they walked along the winding path, Margaret initiated a conversation about family traditions, gently reminding Emily of the small rituals that had shaped the household, from Sunday dinners to bedtime stories and weekend chores, weaving these memories into a broader lesson about responsibility, commitment, and the impact of actions on others, while allowing Emily to share her perspective, thoughts, and hopes for reconnecting with the grandchildren. And Margaret listened intently, noting the subtle ways her daughter expressed both remorse and eagerness, balancing encouragement with firm guidance. And as they paused near the old oak tree, Margaret invited the children to talk about their favorite moments over the years, fostering a sense of continuity and appreciation for the life their grandmother had provided. And Emily contributed to the conversation, acknowledging gaps in her own experience while observing the joy and security that Margaret had cultivated. And throughout the walk, Margaret subtly guided interactions to highlight empathy, communication, and understanding, encouraging Emily to recognize the importance of listening and participating meaningfully in family life. And as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Margaret led the family back toward the house, framing the walk as a moment of shared reflection and growth. And even as they entered the warm light of the living room, Margaret maintained a composed presence, ensuring that the lessons, values, and bonds highlighted during the evening would resonate, shaping interactions for days to come, reinforcing the principles of respect, patience, and mutual care, and laying the foundation for ongoing connection and collaboration between her, Emily, and the grandchildren, demonstrating through thoughtful conversation, gentle guidance, and shared experiences that meaningful reconciliation, understanding, and family cohesion could be achieved while honoring the efforts and sacrifices that had sustained the household for 20 years. As the family settled back inside, Margaret suggested that they spend the early evening working on a creative project together, gathering materials for a simple craft activity that allowed Lily and Noah to express their thoughts and feelings through drawing and storytelling, and Emily joined in, initially hesitating but gradually contributing ideas and participating alongside the children, while Margaret offered gentle guidance, emphasizing the joy of collaboration and the importance of listening to one another. And as they worked, Margaret skillfully wove lessons about responsibility, thoughtfulness, and the impact of words and actions into the activity, prompting discussions about respect, cooperation, and the shared values that had sustained the family through years of routine and care. And Emily began to see the subtle ways in which Margaret had fostered a nurturing environment, recognizing that every small choice, from maintaining daily schedules to offering encouragement and support, had shaped the household into a stable and loving space for the children. And as they displayed the completed crafts around the room, Margaret encouraged each family member to share what they had learned, allowing the children to express appreciation for their grandmother's patience and for their mother's growing awareness, while Emily reflected aloud on the importance of her own engagement and the responsibilities that came with rejoining the household. And throughout the evening, Margaret maintained a calm and attentive presence, offering praise, setting gentle boundaries, and subtly steering conversations to reinforce lessons of accountability and empathy, ensuring that the family remained centered on shared understanding and collaboration. And as the warm light of the living room mingled with the fading twilight outside, laughter, gentle conversation, and the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment filled the space, creating an atmosphere of connection and mutual recognition. And Margaret observed with quiet pride the way the children and Emily interacted, noting the increased attentiveness, the thoughtful contributions, and the shared enjoyment, understanding that these small but meaningful exchanges were laying the groundwork for stronger bonds, improved communication, and continued growth, while also demonstrating that guidance, patience, and subtle reinforcement could encourage reflection, responsibility, and the gradual rebuilding of trust, setting the stage for future interactions where family values, respect, and love would continue to guide decisions, actions, and relationships within the household. As night fully embraced the Ohio neighborhood, Margaret suggested they all settle into the cozy living room for a calm evening, the soft glow of the lamps casting warm light across the familiar furniture and family photographs, and the children nestled into blankets on the floor, while Emily sat attentively nearby, her posture reflecting both curiosity and a quiet acknowledgement of the household routines she had once missed. And Margaret began a gentle discussion about plans for the coming week, inviting the children to share their ideas and thoughts while subtly encouraging Emily to participate in a collaborative and considerate manner, noting how she responded to the perspectives of the children and how she navigated the responsibilities that had been entrusted to Margaret for the past 20 years. And as they spoke, Margaret wove in reflections on respect, patience, and the importance of consistent care, highlighting how these principles had shaped the home and nurtured a stable environment, while allowing Emily to express her aspirations for involvement and her understanding of the delicate balance required to support the grandchildren effectively. And the conversation flowed naturally into shared stories and reflections, with Margaret skillfully reinforcing positive behaviors, recognizing Emily's growing awareness, and celebrating moments of insight, cooperation, and mutual understanding. And the children contributed enthusiastically, their observations and laughter, creating a sense of joy and continuity, while Margaret guided the dialogue to ensure that lessons about empathy, accountability, and thoughtful action were integrated seamlessly into the family dynamic. And as the evening progressed, the family shared a quiet snack, discussing plans for the weekend and reflecting on the day's experiences, while Margaret maintained her composed presence, gently steering interactions to reinforce values, traditions, and emotional awareness. And Emily began to recognize the depth of her mother's dedication and the subtle wisdom that had guided the household, gaining insight into the trust, patience, and consistency required to maintain harmony. And by the time the children were preparing for bed, the atmosphere was calm and warm, with mutual respect and understanding blossoming as Margaret quietly observed the interactions, noting progress and areas for continued attention. And as the night deepened, she reflected on the careful guidance, shared stories, and thoughtful dialogue that had allowed the family to reconnect meaningfully, reinforcing the bonds between grandmother, mother, and children while establishing a foundation for continued growth, cooperation, and the ongoing nurturing of love, trust, and mutual respect in the household.